Brands are facing a turning point. By 2030, Millennials and Gen Z will make up 75% of ASEAN's consumers, reshaping expectations, habits, and loyalty. To unpack this, we are joined by Eileen Goh from DMK. So, Aileen, what mindset shifts do brands need to adopt now to stay relevant?
To stay relevant today, brands actually need to shift from being product first to selling first. There was a study done across more than 100,000 of our customers that shows how emotionally connected customers have, for example, more than 300% higher lifetime value, greater loyalty, or even more willingness to advocate for the brand. So, in short, functional value honestly is no longer enough today. And for today's consumers, what we do find is that they ask this question, which is, does this brand reflect who I am or who I want to become? So perhaps for every brand, the real questions to ask ourselves is first, what emotion does your brand evoke among your community? Secondly, what values does your brand represent? And third, do those values actually align with your customer's identity? What we did find was that 5 years ago in 2020, when we did our market research, we didn't really have that strong emotional resonance with our community, and especially among millennials and Gen Z. So as a result of that, we rebranded, moving away from being very product driven to being very emotionally led. And the key part of how we actually try to change was to look at how we can reshape our mission to serve the community, not just through fashion, but also beyond fashion to look and feel good and support their life journey and their milestones. And what we found was that the pivot actually worked because of the emotional authenticity that we had. And what we find is people don't just buy into what looks good anymore. They buy what feels true. They buy a belonging to a brand, the values that the brand have, and the identity that relates to them.
You mentioned that brands need to continuously evolve, but do you have any suggestions on how legacy brands can do this without losing their identity?
That's actually very relevant for us because for us, we are a 25-year-old legacy brand today. And what we learned through our branding phase in the year 2020 was that legacy isn't really about staying the same. It's about staying true while learning to speak a new language. And I think the biggest mistake that legacy brands try to make is to erase their roots in the pursuit of relevance. So for us, our branding was really rooted more in the reflection and not so much of rejection of what we used to be. And when we rebranded, we were a 20-year-old legacy brand at that point in time. We had a really strong loyal base, women who grew up with DMK. And back then, because we already had such a strong footing, it was quite tempting to chase Gen Z trends blindly and to erase what we had as an attempt to start someone new or to start over anew. But we knew that at the end of the day, you don't evolve by forgetting who brought you here. Beyond that, we also support a lot of social causes such as Breast Cancer Foundation, and we also hosted a lot of community-related events to really be on ground and to listen to what our community wanted. So ultimately, what we realized as a legacy brand is that um, fundamentally, our core, which is what we wanted to do for our community, to design for Asian women, is actually inclusivity. And the whole idea of inclusivity, the whole idea of comfort, the confidence, and even emotional alignment, these are things that will transcend generation.
Those are really good points, Aileen, but let's also talk about the things we need to avoid. What are some common missteps that brands make when targeting Gen Zs and millennials?
So the first one is treating Gen Z and millennials as one segment, but the reality is they speak quite different emotional dialects. So there was a study I remember by McKinsey that shows how Gen Z values authenticity, rawness, and even identity ownership. But for millennials, they're a little bit different. They lean into more like aspiration and curated self-image. There was even an article by MIT that shows how Gen Zs reject perfection, but millennials might want something very different. So what we learned was that the message needs to be consistent. And by the message, it means the mission and the vision and also the values the brand represent. But the delivery, it needs to be quite different. So like for Gen Z, it could look like unfiltered behind the scenes content, honest storytelling, or even very vulnerable conversations. But for millennials, it could mean very polished visuals or aspirational narratives that, at the end of the day, it's still rooted in authenticity. And the second misstep that we learned was to not treat values like a trend. So Gen Z and millennials care a lot about brand purpose. But at the same time, because they are a technology generation, they are also highly skeptical. So we learned that you can't really borrow values for a campaign and you have to leave them at every single touch point. And what we try to do as a brand is to ensure that we stay true to ourselves and ensure we listen and are aligned with our community through two key points. The first one is that our mission is our filter. So we constantly ask, because our mission is to support the community look and feel good through fashion and beyond, is does this look and feel good? For example, for our products, we focus on ensuring that they both look and feel good. If it looks good or feels good, even if we have gone through 5 rounds of sampling, we'll remove that product from our line completely. So to avoid some of the common missteps as a brand, I think is to really look at how execution at the end of the day is just noise if it's not anchored to purpose. So whether it's a raw TikTok video or a polished Instagram story, what matters is that it should be emotionally real and very mission aligned. And you would easily lose the trust of the newer generation like Gen Z, Millennials.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Eileen. Looking forward to having you back on the program.
Thank you for having me today.
Once again, that was Eileen Goh, Chief Creative Officer at DMK. For more news, visit retailasia.com.